Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Perfect.
Great. I can't see anyone, so it's very strange. I only see the presentation, but I have seen many known faces and names, and I wish we could meet in person, but maybe in the next event. In any case, I will give you an overview of what has been decided in the final negotiations. So basically the contents of Article 24 and 25 of the Interreg regulation. And after that, we will have a question and answer session. And there, my two colleagues, Dirk Peters and Simona Pochlova, will also be available to reply to your questions. Dirk has been in Interreg for many years. He's also our main legal resource on Interreg, I would say, in DG Regio. He has not been in Interreg the whole time, but always close to Interreg and always a big help to the Interreg units. Simona has also worked in Interreg for many years, also with some pauses in between, but has come back and will reply to questions related to external programs and transnational programs. Okay, so could I have the first slide, please? So I think the main difference which has occurred in the end of the negotiations is that projects of limited financial volume have become compulsory. This was the most important issue for the European Parliament during the entire negotiations on the Interreg regulation, to have these kinds of projects in all Interreg programs, because the reason behind is to have small projects close to the citizens everywhere in Europe. So what exactly has been decided? There has all Interreg programs should have projects of limited financial volume, either directly within the program or within a small project fund or several project funds. In the case of Interreg B and D programs, it's possible to have an exception if you can justify it and state the reasons for this in the program when you submit it. Next slide, please. So what does this mean exactly? It means that it will be compulsory for all Interreg A programs, which means all the cross-border programs, whether they are internal or external, to implement projects of limited financial volume in some way. Whereas for the B and D programs, there is a possibility to have an exception. So this the projects of limited financial volume are not defined in any way. There is no upper limit in terms of budget or anything like that. There is no explanation or, well, there is no definition of what a small project is. So it's up to each program to define this in the context of the program, depending on what is relevant. That the size might differ depending on the program. The purpose of the small or the projects of limited financial volume might differ from program to program. The target groups might be different. This is all very open to fit into each program's interests. Next slide, please. So that was Article 24, which is simply just about that, the fact that small-scale projects are compulsory within the exceptions for B and D programs. Then all the rules related to small project funds you will find in the new Article 25. And the Article 25 starts with defining the beneficiary, who can be a beneficiary, who can lead, manage a small project fund. There are three options. There are first the two options which were proposed by the Commission in the initial proposal for the regulation. Those are a cross-border legal body and an EGTC. Now, some member states very much wanted to have a third option, which was agreed. And this third option is a body with legal personality. And to this third option, there is a condition linked. And this condition is that in the case where a body with a legal personality, so a body on one side of the border in one country is managing a small project fund, then the small projects have to be selected jointly in a body which has representatives from at least two countries involved in the program. And they together have to select the joint small projects. Now, what does this mean exactly? If we can have the next slide, please. Yeah, just a few examples, because there have been many questions over even the last 2 years about this. What is a cross-border legal body? Well, it depends, but an easy solution is, for instance, if you have an association in one country and you have an association in another country, then the association in country A becomes a member of the association of country B, and you have a cross-border legal body. It's quite an easy solution. It's not very complicated. Shouldn't be very time consuming. A European grouping for territorial cooperation is of course a great option as well, which takes a bit longer to develop. But we have many GTCs across Europe, and we even have a few implementing small project funds. Just two examples mentioned here in the Regio Maas-Rijn program and also in the Slovakia-Hungary program. And then the body with legal personality, well, that basically is a body on one side of the border in one country, which has to have the capacity and be suitable for the task of implementing a small project fund. And this is up to the member states, the countries involved, to identify such a body if for different reasons they do not want to go for the other two options. And next slide, please. So what is the rationale behind this provision on the small project fund beneficiary? Well, first of all, the need for simplified and efficient management structures for the benefit of the final recipients under the small project funds. If you have one body implementing a small project fund, you can have the optimal management structures in terms of time and efficiency, and this is all to the benefit of the small final recipients of the small projects. Another issue is the management costs. If you have everything concentrated to one organization, you can also keep the management costs at an acceptable level. So these are the main reasons behind this provision. Next slide, please. If we go back then to this option of the legal body or the body with legal personality, which is not a cross-border legal body or an EGTC, there is the condition that I mentioned before, that there has to be, this body has to set up a body with representatives from the other countries involved, at least one more country participating in the program, to select the joint small projects. And questions have, of course, occurred. What does it mean, the joint small projects? The reason why this term is used here in this provision is that the legislator wanted to make sure that even in the case where you have a body on one side of the border implementing a small project fund, that you would still have a cross-border effect, that you would still involve partners from both sides of the borders. So the important thing is that the projects, the small projects, are selected jointly, and also that the small projects have a cross-border effect, regardless of whether they are implemented by one or several final recipients. And just to give a few examples, because this is has also been discussed, and there might be different views on this. What is a small project with cross-border effect? Well, for instance, if you can imagine a school in one country and a school on the other country, on the other side of the border. Together, these schools participate in a small project where they are both final recipients, and they make study visits to each other's countries to get to know each other. The students get to know each other in the other country. But you can also have a situation where you have one recipient, for instance, a municipality in one country, which organizes a big public event and invites people from the other side of the border. And the final recipient is then this inviting municipality. And you don't necessarily need to have another final recipient on the other side of the border, but you are doing something together. And you're involving people who live in the border area in the project. What would not be a truly joint small project would be, for instance, a situation where you have a final recipient in one country who is modernizing a tourist facility on one side of the border in his or her country. And then in the other country, let's say some 100 kilometers away from the border, in both cases, you have another final recipient who is also modernizing some tourist facility or a zoo. And there is no cooperation between the two. There is nothing really in common between the two different actions, the two projects, and there is no clear benefit to the people in the border region. So these are two projects which are very similar, and they might actually be doing exactly the same thing, but they have there is nothing that really ties the two together. That would be rather a mirror project and not a small project. And this is the kind of projects that the legislators wanted to prevent from happening. And this is why this term has been applied here. But this doesn't mean that in other types of small project funds which are managed by a cross-border legal body or EGTC, you have different conditions. Small projects should always be joint. It doesn't matter who manages a small project fund. It's just that it was put here for the clarity to prevent any abuse of this third management option. Next slide, please. Now we come more to the detailed setup and costs of the small project fund. So I think, yes, you can have one or several small project funds in a program, but the total contribution from the budget of the program cannot be more than 20% of the allocation. The small project fund is an operation within the meaning of Article 2 in the CPR, Common Provisions Regulation. This is a very important provision because it prevents any auditors from treating a small project fund beneficiary as an intermediate body, as a program-like institution. It is just an operation like any other. Then there is an article also about the management costs, about the limitations to how much money a small project fund can dedicate to management costs. So they should not be more than 20% of the total eligible costs of an SPF. And this is based on the staff and other cost categories, which are listed in Articles 39 to 43 of the Interreg regulation. Next slide, please. So what do you have to think of if you decide to set up a small project fund, and what do you have to expect from the small project fund beneficiary to have capacity for? So it's up to the small project fund beneficiary to set up the conditions for support. In the conditions for support to a small project fund, you have to, as managing authority, ensure that the beneficiary establishes a non-discriminatory and transparent selection procedure of the small projects. You have to ensure that the small project fund beneficiary applies objective criteria for the selection of small projects, and that any conflict of interest are avoided. The small project fund beneficiary also has to assess applications for support. This is not done by the MA in any way. This is the pure responsibility of the SPF. And also the SPF fixes the amount of support for each small project. So the SPF will do the contracting. This is not done by the managing authority. Next slide, please. In terms of financial flows, or archiving and audit trail, the final recipients, so within the SPF, I mean those who implement the small projects, will receive their reimbursement directly from the small project fund beneficiary. And in the document, the contracting document, the SPF beneficiary will have to set out a number of issues. Again, this is about the document setting out the conditions of support to the SPF. So this is what the SPF beneficiary has to make sure. And this is maybe the most challenging and important part for many SPF beneficiaries, that they have to be accountable for the implementation of the operation and keep all supporting documents required for the audit trail in accordance with the regulation. This is something that the small project fund beneficiary has to do. The next slide, please. And in terms of communication, the small project fund beneficiary also has to make sure that to list all the final recipients who receive money through the small project fund publicly. And also this SPF beneficiary also has to ensure that the final recipients comply with the communication requirements, which are set out in the Interreg regulation Article 36, which reads that final recipients have to communicate publicly on the Interreg operation. And what this means, it's a bit up to this SPF beneficiary to see, depending on the small project. You have to see it proportionately to what the small project does. If the small project organizes a public event, for instance, a basic condition should be to publish information about this in a local, in some kind of local media, stating that the event is co-financed by the European Union. Next slide, please. The use of the use of simplified cost options is compulsory for within small project funds for small projects up to 100,000 euros. This is in order to ensure the simplification for the final recipients. Where the flat rate financing is used, the categories of costs to which the flat rate is applied may be reimbursed in accordance with Article 48A of the Common Provisions Regulation, which means that they can be reimbursed based on real costs. Just to remind you, if you don't go for a small project fund, but decide to implement small scale projects outside as regular operations, in that case, the same rule applies as to other regular projects, that you have to apply simplified cost options for projects up to 200,000 euros. Next slide, please. And that was the end. I went quickly. At least that was my impression.